matter you work as a construction manager or as a construction engineer, as an architect, contractor, employer, you have to be knowledgeable about this topic and the issues that may be raised during the construction projects, because these issues are related to the success of the construction projects. My name is Reza, and today I'm going to talk about the claims and disputes in construction industry. Profit of the project, the cost of each crew, the cost of each equipment, because they are really important, especially for subcontractors, heavy subcontractors. And for example, in the cost estimating, you have $1 million as a cost estimate of the project, and at the end, you should pay as an employer for example, $10 million. Why? Because your engineer cannot handle the construction contract and cannot manage the notices during the construction, cannot perform the time impact analysis for delay analysis, cannot perform the analysis for the, for example, critical path, and cannot realize what is going to be the final date of the project. So your engineer is really important, your contractor is really important, because your contractor should be knowledgeable about the contract term. If your contractor doesn't know anything about the contract terms, then, for example, he or she would raise questions for RFI, request for interpretation. And the engineer is going to answer, and many conflicts arise just because of the failure to properly administer the construction contract. And another thing is directed suspension of work. Your employer asks you actually to suspend your work, and you have many equipment, loader, for example, backhoe, and all of them available in the job site. You cannot go to other project, and your project is going to be extended. Then you want to go to another project after the end of this project, but because this current project is extended for 1 year or, for example, 2 months, you cannot go to that project. You lose that project. You lose that money. Who is going to pay for your general overhead that you want to achieve from that project? It is home office overhead and unabsorbed home office overhead. I don't know how many of you know the, for example, Arkley formula, Hudson formula, Emden formula. They are going to calculate, for example, the home office overhead cost that you're going to ask and claim from the employer. They are real, and you should learn that if you don't know. And the project overhead costs increase. Who is going to pay for that? You should calculate those costs. But everything is related to the record. At the beginning of this session, I talked about the tracking time and the cost of the equipment related to each activity. They are really important, because if you want to claim for that cost, you have to have the time card sheet. You have to have the equipment sheet, the activity sheet, and the cost and the time that each equipment allocated to each activity. Directed acceleration. Imagine, for example, your project is extended, and not because of the contractor's fault, but due to, for example, a scope change. And the owner comes to you and asks for acceleration of the project. Says, okay, Mr. Contractor, please accelerate the project and give me the recovery schedule. Who is going to pay that recovery cost? You say to the owner, employer, that I should be granted for extension of time first. But the owner refuses to give that extension of time to you. But you have to perform that order. You cannot avoid that. In that case, you accelerate the work, and at the end, the owner comes to you and says that, okay, we are on time, we are not behind the schedule, and I should not pay any more cost to you. And you say that, I recovered the schedule, I paid much more cost. This is called constructive acceleration. It is really important term, and you should search about that. It is actually a real thing, and many claims are related to constructive acceleration. So directed acceleration is one of the important things that most commonly cited between the causes of claims. And the final thing is ambiguous specifications. Many times we cannot be sure about the specifications in the contract. I, as a contractor, explain something, and the employer explains another thing. And we have here a claim that
the design was okay. We then immediately received an instruction to accelerate in the 2 weeks back from the production that we lost. So it's exactly what you said. And it happens quite often. We have to work the night shift now, or the project does, to try and accelerate. Yeah, it's really interesting that you mentioned it, and that's something I've seen happen, like a cost there. Yeah, so it's just, I think you're right, is to keep a track of the costs.
Exactly. Actually, it is everything.
And it's the concrete contractor. There was a different subcontractor was basically handing over slabs to us to enable us to start being BCL, like control of it, layers on the edge.
Yeah, on our site there's a 4D BIM team. I'm on HPC Scala. It's from what it looks like, as they're developing it currently, it looks pretty good. Being able to plan movements and create exclusion zones based on the plans that you've got. It's quite incredible, and yeah, I've obviously not played with it myself because it's being implemented by some experts, but
I think that is really important, that your contract should have clauses how you are going to resolve that. FIDIC, JCT, NEC, all of them have the situation that may be raised during the contract. For example, in FIDIC, it says at the beginning you should submit your notice, you should give your notice in 28 days. After that, the engineer is going to check that, and in 84 days, you should submit the supplementary data. Your engineer is going to check that and is going to resolve that. If he or she cannot resolve that, then is going to another level. For example, DAAB is going to check, review that claim.
Construction design may be 2 weeks or 1 week before we actually do it, but generally a lot of the kind of key information.
Actually, it depends on your contract, but usually it doesn't have enforceability if the contract asks you as a contractor to be responsible for the change order as a result of the design, because the engineer is usually responsible for the design, and even the design is not submitted. If you wait for the design, then this duration would be the responsibility of the owner, not the contractor. You should be very careful about your schedule, because the review time, the design change, the design work should be on your schedule as well. Because this is a real activity. It is true, this is an activity of the owner, but it affects the critical path. Then the changes to the...
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, great experience being with you, Reza. Just to tell the students that Reza is now in Iran, so he's around 3.5 hours ahead and having all his commitment and activities. So put some time to be with us. It's a great pleasure, and thank you very much, actually. So if there is no more question, I'm thanking Reza, and again, I'm going to record, and just as students know that I've recorded this session, and I'm going to upload actually this recorded version if you want us to review and listen to what Reza suggested again. Is there any more question? Otherwise, we'll say goodbye to Reza and end this session. No more question?
No, that's all for today.
Cheers.
Thank you very much, Reza.